6 a.m. Mile High City on this Tuesday, Election Day, November 4th, 2025. You've tuned in to the Jeff and Bill Show, News Talk 710 KNUS. I'm your co-host, Jeff Hunt, along with Bill Thorpe, bringing you the freshest insights and hottest takes from the right, left, and center. Big news this morning. Breaking news. Dick Cheney, powerful vice president and Washington insider, has died at the age of 84. A former defense secretary, congressman, he held the nation's number 2 job under President George W. Bush and was the architect of policies in an era of war and economic change, the New York Times reporting. Dick Cheney, widely regarded as the most powerful vice president in American history, who was George W. Bush's running mate in 2 successful campaigns for the presidency and his most influential White House advisor in an era of terrorism, war, and economic change, died Monday. He was 84 years old. Bill. Wow, what a moment of reflection.
Yeah,
because,
this is an interesting one.
I mean, I'll give you kind of my take real quick. Was, and I've talked about it on this show before, I was a supporter of the invasion of the war in Iraq and Afghanistan. Following 9/11, I thought that we had to send a message that we had to fight over there, not here. We lost nearly 3,000 innocent Americans on that day. I wanted the fight. I wanted retribution. I wanted justice. And in many ways, I bought into the neocon belief that we could bring democracy. If the people of Afghanistan could just taste it, just taste the freedom that comes with democracy, of course, it'll spread through the Middle East. It'll be a new era in world history. Boy, was I wrong about that. Now, I do believe that it was important to get justice for what happened in 9/11. And I believe that Saddam Hussein, at the time, according to everything that was told to us, was a threat. That if you just let these problems fester, it eventually resulted in Americans dying. And so I advocated for it. And now, goodness, 25 years later, you reflect on his presidency, his vice presidency is definitely powerful, influential, but man, did he take us in the wrong direction.
Yeah, I was never really a fan. The whole March to the Iraq War, I really diverged with most people on that one, and that was a difficult time. I never thought that the case for Iraq was made strongly enough, especially because Iraq was the check on Iran. Iraq was the secular check in the region on Iran's power. They were the balancing act. As awful as Saddam Hussein was, I wouldn't cozy up to him, but I understood where his position was on the chessboard in that game. I was not really a fan of going into with boots on the ground in Afghanistan, and the question I always had at that time when they were talking about bringing democracy to the Middle East was, do you understand how difficult occupation is afterwards and setting up that governmental system? That is incredibly difficult. And I wasn't convinced that we were set up for that kind of an idea, and some of the choices that we made inside of Iraq proved that to be correct. Not that I was any sort of a soothsayer, but I just was skeptical. That never happens on this show. You've never heard me on the Jeff and Bill Show be skeptical about things. No, that's never things that I do. So that kind of was more how I'm wired, I think, more than me having any sort of like grand insight when I was much younger. So I'm not going to sit here and pat myself on the back on that one. I thought that his evolution was very interesting and somewhat problematic for the GOP because I do believe that he was a person that favored the idea of a unitary executive until he was confronted with Donald Trump as the unitary executive.
Interesting.
Yeah, I think that he saw something in Trump that was divergent from what he thought the Republican Party should be. And I think that's why you saw him breaking from the party and even going as far as endorsing Kamala in the last election. I don't think that it was necessarily a change of conscience. I don't think that he was becoming a liberal or a Democrat. I think that he absolutely values the unitary executive, but it was more of a, not this guy. I can't trust this guy with the powers that I want in that office. But that's a personal opinion. Yeah.
I think that's fascinating insight. So Dick Cheney, dead, 84, leads the Republican Party for 8 years as vice president of the United States, and even prior to that, major influencer, and then ends his life supporting Kamala Harris and watching what happened to his daughter in the battle with Donald Trump. Fascinating.
Yeah, I like that you brought in his daughter, because remember, in that era, he was called Bush's brain. It was the idea that he was the shadow president, that Bush was the figurehead, and he was behind the scenes. For everybody that called in during the Biden administration and said, oh, Barack Obama's behind the scenes pulling the strings. Well, we have a little bit more proof behind the scenes that Cheney was doing that, not as being a puppet master, but absolutely he was controlling more things. And I find, again, the GOP's disillusion with Liz Cheney absolutely fascinating, because prior to Trump, she's probably your odds-on best chance at getting a female president. And with her communication skills and style, I think she would have had a good shot at it. I'm not saying she would have been, but given the other women that are possibilities inside the GOP now, I don't think you got anybody that can hold a candle to who she could have been as a candidate. I'm not saying who she is now. I'm saying who she could have been as a candidate for the GOP. Yeah, I think that was a missed opportunity for the GOP personally.
So Liz Cheney rode around in the front seat of my little CRV one day.
Hey, all right.
Because my job for the Romney operation was to pick up all the surrogates at the airport, in addition to being the coalition director.
Yeah.
So I picked them up and took them around to all the events, talked about what we're the issues we need them to talk about and focus on in their speeches. So I did that for Marco Rubio. I did it for Liz Cheney. I did it for all the Romney sons. I mean, everybody that came in as a surrogate at that point.
Yeah.
Jeff Foxworthy. That was fun. But yeah, Liz Cheney rode around in my 2009 CRV front seat that my daughter now drives. And we drove around the state of Colorado. And she was very pleasant. I had a great experience with her.
That's the thing is, on a personal level, I've heard very pleasant person. Very pleasant. I've never had any personal interactions, I can't say, but I've never heard anything that leads me to believe anything other than that.
We had Dick Cheney at Colorado Christian University. It was one of the final events with Bill Armstrong before he passed away. Dick Cheney came and did live radio broadcast with Hugh Hewitt, who was broadcasting on the campus studio at that point. And Dick Cheney brought his dog. He was with a golden retriever and traveled around. And Dick Cheney had heart problems all throughout his life.
Yeah.
They did a whole 60 Minutes episode on him one time and his heart surgeons, and how I think the way they described it was every time you would get to a red light that might kill Dick Cheney, it turned green. Like the technology just developed.
Yeah.
Like right as you pulled up to it, the technology would develop and Dick Cheney would be able to continue to live. And so 84, considering the heart problems he had.
Yeah, and I love the fact that after he had the heart replacement, that because of the mechanics inside, technically he didn't have a heartbeat.
He had a swooshing.
Yes, and I love that, the idea that because he was played as this evil Darth Vader character by so many of the liberals, and the fact that the Darth Vader character now had a mechanical heart that didn't even contain a heartbeat. I'm sorry, the Star Wars kid in me loved that. I thought that was hilarious.
Yeah.
Yes, I thought that was fantastic.
So we'd love to hear from you as you reflect on the life of Dick Cheney, 84 years old. What did you think of his legacy, his time, the power he brought to his office, the impact and influence? And if you knew him personally, would love to hear from you. Give us a call this morning.
Yeah. I also want to know if you changed your mind.
Yes.
If you were a Dick Cheney fan and then you changed, what changed and why? What was it that changed your mind? Just like Jeff had the evolution about neocon and what was going to go on in the Middle East, maybe if they had a Dick Cheney now telling him those things, he would be a little more skeptical. So what changed your mind if you are not that torn up on Dick Cheney's passing, if you're like, well, he was just a rhino now anyway, I would be fascinated to hear what has changed your opinion of him. Because at one time, he was one of the stalwarts of the GOP. Why did it change?
That's exactly right. 303-696-1971. Text us on the Dan Caplis Law Text line, 720-819-5115. Now it's time for News and Comment with Blake Olson.
Blake Olson.
Blake Olson, News and Comment.
Good Tuesday morning. It is 36, partly cloudy in Denver, expecting a high of 72 today. News sponsored by Pastor Camp Heating and Air Conditioning at 303-777-1234 to learn more about special savings opportunities on Lennox equipment. Our top story, of course, as Jeff and Bill just discussed, former VP Dick Cheney has died at the age of 84. In a statement, the family said he died due to complications of pneumonia, cardiac, and vascular disease. He served as the nation's 46th VP under W from 2001 to 2009, of course, survived by wife Lynn, 2 daughters, and 7 grandkids. Investigators in the Denver Auditor's Office recovered more than $2 million in stolen wages over the past 12 months. Auditor Timothy O'Brien says Denver Labor closed 859 cases during the reporting year that ended on October 31st. Investigators reviewed over 100,000 payroll records and helped more than 7,000 workers receive unpaid wages. That's a 60% increase over the previous year. It's election day across the country with a number of key races on the ballot. In New York City's race for mayor, Kami Dani maintains his lead in the polls over independent Andrew Cuomo and Republican Curtis Lewa. Stephen Miller.
And what you're seeing in New York City with Mamdani, that is the future. A party that believes in no bail, a party that believes in no jail, a party that believes in no borders. But here's one group they do want to put in jail. They're political enemies. Like good commies, they will not arrest their criminals. They won't arrest the gang members, but they will arrest their political opposition. That's how society dies, Sean. That's what we're up against now.
That was on Fox News, of course, last night. In Virginia, Democrat Abigail Spanberger, who evidently has no conscience, has maintained a double-digit lead over Republican Lieutenant Governor Winsome Earl Sears in that race for governor, unfortunately, but we still have a little time. The Schumer shutdown has now tied the record for the longest in U.S. history. The Senate is set to vote for a 14th time to end the impasse, and Senate Majority Leader John Thune says he's optimistic that lawmakers will find a solution this week. Don't hold your breath. The Supreme Court will hear arguments over DJT's tariffs tomorrow. The High Court scheduled oral arguments for November 5th after it agreed to fast-track the case. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent says he'll be in the front row.
Well, they can say what they want. I am there to emphasize that this is an economic emergency. National security is economic security. Economic security is national security. As the Treasury Secretary of the United States, I'm in charge of maintaining both.
The tariffs will stay in place until the court makes a decision. A semi-truck driver died Monday after driving off a steep embankment. The driver was ejected and speed may have been a factor. Officials say he was pronounced dead on the scene. It happened on Wolf Creek Pass southbound near milepost 161. The Nuggets at the Kings last night.
On the night, Christian Brown dish it to Yoke. Sweet music.
All right. Chris Marlowe, Nikola Jokic, 34 points, 7 boards, 14 assists, 4 steals. Christian Brown, 21 points. Nuggets 4-2. The Heat in town tomorrow. Most important practice of the short week today for the Broncos as they play host to the Raiders on Thursday night. Big AFC division game, especially for the Broncos. Cardinals beat the Cowboys last night.
Put some time back on. Brissett, touchdown.
27-17 with backup quarterback Jacoby Brissett. Man, Cowboy fans have to just be losing their minds right now. The Lightning at the Avalanche tonight in Lodo, NHL hockey. 35 in Centennial, 32 in Golden, 36 in Denver. Jeff and Billy continue. Wake up with Jeff and Bill. Blake Olson, News Talk, 710 KNUS.
KNUS forecast for the Denver metro area calls for a cool, quiet, pleasant start to this Tuesday. Light jacket again, feel nice this morning, but it'll be a shirt sleeve afternoon. 40s this morning, mid and upper 70s this afternoon, low 40s for your Tuesday night. Lower to maybe mid 70 Wednesday, partly cloudy, lows mid 40s, mid and upper 60s Thursday into Friday, dry and breezy. I'm meteorologist Mark Huer in the 710 KNUS Weather Center.
Welcome to the Jeff and Bill Show. Talking about the passing of Dick Cheney. Text messages hot on this one. Some saying the most powerful vice president of our lifetimes, maybe ever. I agree with that. I'm trying to think of another vice president who had the impact.
Most vice presidents, you have no idea what they do. You absolutely knew what he was doing. So,
George H.W. Bush was an impactful vice president under Reagan, for sure, because he was former CIA. So what's fascinating is you get these kind of newcomers to Washington, D.C. that feel like it's important to have somebody that's from the kind of more entrenched operations of Washington, D.C. to help them out. Reagan was this way. So he picks George H.W. Bush, who was former director of the CIA. Obama's this way, right? Obama picks Joe Biden because of all of his experience legislatively, that type of thing. In many ways, Trump did this. Trump was trying to build bridges with evangelicals, so picks Mike Pence, but also because Mike Pence was a former congressman. So new Washington, D.C. Trump 2.0 picks J.D. Vance, not super seasoned, but U.S. Senator, so knows the legislative side a little bit. And then George W. Bush picks Dick Cheney. And Dick Cheney had served as a member of Congress, Secretary of Defense, the Vice President, so new Washington, D.C. Well, do you think it's important for these guys to have that type of connection within D.C.?
It, again, depends on who the presidential candidate is, I think, and their connections. And as you said, and most of the time, VP covers a weakness or an area in which you need more support. So whatever you feel on that resume you don't have a lot of, that's what you pick. And remember, though, and I had forgotten about the story until you said it right there, about Dick Cheney doing the search for the vice president, because Bush had come to him asking him to help him search for the vice president. And then during the conversation, he's like, "Oh, I have found him. He is me." And I'm sorry, in the radio, I've had a couple of bosses that have done this too, this long, exhaustive search for a person who's going to take over the new show. And they're like, well, after a long, exhaustive search, oddly, I looked in the mirror this morning and found the right candidate. And I always was skeptical of those people in the radio business. So when I saw that happen in politics, I went, oh, good God. It just made me laugh because I've seen that before. But yeah, he went on a long, exhaustive search and looked in the mirror. Yeah.
I am getting text messages from people that worked with him. Personally, I asked them to reflect on that. They said he was a wonderful leader. They enjoyed working for him. He loved his country.
Did he ever force choke anyone?
And yeah, right. And had a deep dedication to public service over many decades. So people that got to know him up close personally. And obviously, there's a lot of jokes around the hunting situation, but. Yes. People that worked with him,
sort of forget to that.
Reflecting.
Yeah. Now, I think it's interesting that they say that he was a wonderful person and that he's a good person, and so those individuals that had that experience with him, I think, in my mind, sort of explains why he had the turn later on and didn't endorse Trump, and it in fact because whatever it was, he thought Trump was wired wrong for his party and the eventual goals and what the party was going to need long term. Again, I can be wrong about this, but this is my interpretation, that I don't think that he was becoming some sort of secret liberal. I don't think that he felt the Democrats were right on almost any issue. I don't think he probably agreed with Kamala Harris on more than maybe one issue, and I'm not sure I could even point to that one. But I think that he felt what Trump was doing and going to do was of such a danger for the long-term health of not only his party but his country that he had to endorse Kamala. And I think, in my opinion, some of that has been borne out only because it is now Trump's party. That you can make an argument that it's no longer the GOP, it's the MAGA party. Now, there are people out there that still hang on to that GOP moniker, but soup to nuts, it really resembles a MAGA party much more than the GOP.
Look, and the GOP's changed like that throughout its history. Founded with Abraham Lincoln. Certainly. What Abraham Lincoln and Ulysses S. Grant built was different than what subsequent Republicans built, which is different than what Reagan built. This was different than what Bush built. So each iteration, you could say the same thing about the Democrat Party. The party of JFK, we often hear this, party of JFK is not the same as it was under Obama, and definitely not the same under Mamdani. So, it changes and adjusts.
And I am curious to see with Mamdani how much of a larger influence he becomes, because he is a mayor. It would be like, Mayor Pete Buttigieg. Right. And so where's that going to go? Because again, it's mayor versus the higher levels. But what I like the when you talk about Obama and the change of the Democrat Party underneath Obama.
Yeah.
And I think that's very applicable to what we are seeing. The only difference, I think, is that Obama didn't have the Hopey Changey Party. And so it didn't become this subset of this Hope group, this Hopey Changey group. They were still Democrats, where inside of the GOP, you have people that will more times blend with MAGA than say they're GOP. And that's what I mean by the overtaking of the branding, is the branding is changing inside the GOP from where I'm sitting, that it is almost a remake and a remoniker under Trump's leadership. And I think that's what Cheney was pushing back against, in my opinion.
I wonder, too, how much it was just him going, this isn't what I built. This is different.
Could be.
Don't you understand how good it was what I had built? Look, we were bringing democracy to the world. And people are going, no, dude, we literally sacrificed. I mean, we have people texting in right now so angry about the number of lives that were lost in the war in Iraq and Afghanistan.
Yeah.
And the money that was spent there. So people not thrilled with his leadership. And I don't know. It just seems like it could be Cheney. Because for someone committed to the principles of the Republican Party, of what it means to be a Republican, like if you actually read the party platform, to go, Kamala Harris is my pick in this case, you go, whoa, what? Like even if you disagree and say that Trump's not a full-fledged Republican, you can't look at Kamala Harris and go, she's closer to the mark.
Well, it depends on, again, if we wanted to split hairs and make things completely and totally siloed, which would be an unfair discussion, but you could say the only case that comes to my mind would be on trade. You probably could make the argument that Donald Trump's position on trade is 180 degrees away from what has traditionally been the GOP position, and the same thing for Kamala. I'm not certain I could go, so I don't want to paint with a broad brush, but that's the only sliver that I can see.
But that's what you heard from Dick Cheney. It was so personal.
Yeah. And in part probably because of his daughter. And in fact, let's jump back into the Wayback Machine here. And this is Dick Cheney back in March of 2003. He is on Face the Nation, and it's going to be a brief discussion about that idea of why we needed to take action in Iraq and Afghanistan.
You are saying today that in the next few days, the president's going to have to make a very difficult decision. Is war now inevitable?
Well, the president, of course, is on his way to meet in the Azores with the Spanish and British prime ministers. We're coming, I think, to the end of the diplomatic phase, if you will. The president's done everything he could, gone the extra mile to try to get this matter resolved through the United Nations. But he's made it abundantly clear that if the UN is not willing to enforce its own resolutions, that we may then be left with no choice but for the United States and others who agree with us to proceed to disarm Saddam Hussein. And we are prepared to do that. And obviously, given where we are, both diplomatically as well as in the region, we're getting close to the point where the president's going to have to make an important decision.
Oh, did we ever get close to that? We made that decision.
Oh, right.
Yeah. It's interesting to hear that in retrospect, knowing what we know now, to hear, what he's talking about, and the fact that I think there's a bit of irony in how he's leaning on, well, if the UN can't do anything, and now how the GOP and in some ways the Democrats also view the UN as being largely toothless and ineffectual.
Yeah, right.
But in this case, they were waiting for the UN to do something. That's just interesting.
Well, remember, they walked through all of the proper steps to go to war. Remember, you had, why am I forgetting his name?
Was there a congressional declaration?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Remember, because they got Clinton to vote for it. And they hammered her over
Hillary.
that, the Democrats.
That's right. That is right.
So they walked through the congressional declaration, the UN, Colin Powell. Yeah. That's the name.
Oh, yeah.
Remember, Colin goes and makes the argument at the United Nations?
He ruined his career with that.
Yeah, right?
Yeah. Because he basically abdicated all professional credibility after that, because nothing that he talked about turned out to be true.
True, right?
Yeah, and that was a problem. And I think also it was kind of the first, I would say, the beginning of the larger international community looking at the U.S. with a side eye, as having a little bit more skepticism about what we said was going on. Now, they always had it when you run through 50s and 60s.
Yeah, I was going to say Vietnam.
Oh, yeah, we were playing there, but this we made such a public spectacle internationally about having the goods. And so, I mean, again, Vietnam messing around in South America and all sorts of attempted coups. Yeah, we've always had that, but this was such a public display about we are right. How could you? And then we turned out to be oh so wrong. That, I think, is the difference. Is we made the case for Vietnam and coming in and bailing out the French, but I'm not certain. Again, it could just be because of my age. I don't remember it necessarily being as the marketing aspect of it to the American people in the international community, going out there and having Colin Powell talking about the vials and giving the pictures and showing all the stuff that we knew that turned out not to be true.
But also remember this.
Yeah.
The death of 3,000 Americans on 9/11 didn't require a major system.
Oh, yeah.
Right? It was 12 guys, 11 guys?
Yeah.
That did that with Barack, who's the guy in Afghanistan?
Osama bin Laden.
Osama bin Laden.
Yeah. Sorry.
Osama bin Laden. Still in the 6 o'clock hour. My apologies.
Still gotta wake up.
So Osama bin Laden and like 11 guys kill 3,000,
Yeah.
right? So I think the American people at that point weren't looking necessarily for like big systems with weapons of mass destruction. You had, and I want to take people back to what that time was like, because we're kind of Monday morning quarterbacking at this point.
Yeah, sure.
But
Absolutely.
we had just lost 3,000 people.
Yep.
And Afghanistan was a problem. You had these bombings that were taking place of the ships and World Trade Center and stuff like that. And we just kind of like, well, if we catch them, we catch them. You know, that type of thing. CIA is doing its stuff. But it wasn't like a concerted effort the way it was after 9/11 to take out these guys. So there was the sense that, like, if you let these guys fester, Americans here die. So, yes, Colin Powell went to the United Nations and made his defense, but I don't think the American people were looking for the same type of operation that you might see in Iran, for instance. They were going, any guy over there with any type of bad weapon could result in the death of Americans. And Saddam Hussein had sent the Scud missiles towards Israel, you remember, during the war in Iraq, the first one, and then invaded Kuwait. So he was this ongoing problem. And I think people were just super sensitive that if you just let those sit, they are going to eventually result in dead Americans. They need to be taken out. I think that was part of the justification.
Yeah, and for me, it was more, I felt the American people wanted revenge. We wanted to extract that pound of flesh. It wasn't really about bringing democracy to Iraq. It wasn't really about bringing democracy to Afghanistan because we hadn't done any of the back end work. We didn't really have a fully fledged out plan as far as what we're going to do in terms of an occupation. And the reason I say that is making the decision that, hey, let's tell all the people that are fighting in the military, just you're no longer the military and go home. Really bad idea. I mean, just in general. I can't figure out how that would ever get out of a brainstorming session. Just tell them to go home. What? Hang on. I just, again, horrible brainstorming session if that's what happened. And I think that's what we did. We went around and we had a thirst for revenge, and it blinded us to what the implications were. Because at the core, I understand the American people saying, oh, we can't let any of these things happen because eventually something bad will happen to us. But in many ways, it is like at your house, your neighbor 3 houses down teepees you, and you go 2 blocks the other way and go take it out on the guy that didn't even TP your house. That was the weird part, is it was aggression focused towards an enemy that didn't have anything to do with the alleged attack. And that was the thing that was weird. And so it was, in many ways, I felt, about Americans trying to get out there and get revenge and show how big and bad we were, that you shouldn't do this or we're going to come and do this to your country. I think that's what it was.
7586 pointing out 7 countries in 5 years. Was it 7 countries in 5 years?
For what? 7 countries in 5 years?
I don't know.
What?
7 countries in 5 years and the oil that goes along with it. We invaded 7 countries in 5 years. I'm trying to remember what the other 7 were. Libya was under Obama.
Yeah. I'd have to look. I disagree.
Send us the
give us more
7 countries.
Yeah. But again, oil is also kind of the issue as well. That was part of why, we wanted to get into Iraq and the Kurds and some other stuff there. But it's also why we play footsie with the Saudis. In a different scenario where they didn't have access to the oil, we probably would not be nearly as friendly with them, just based on their politics and religion. But yeah, not a bad point.
0459, remember Iraq and Saddam had nothing to do with 9/11. The Saudis did. Bush just hated Saddam, our surrogate against Iran. The USA still looks foolish, and how many of our soldiers died?
That is a good point, based on the idea that most of those hijackers were of Saudi descent, and we didn't seem to have a concern about that at all. And what I would say is, if we had a attack today, and the majority of the nationality of those attacking were Chinese, yeah, we'd probably have an issue. If they were Russian, yeah, we would have an issue. If they were North Korea, yes, we'd have an issue with the country. But In this case, the nationality was papered over in my mind. It wasn't because they gave us a different target.
Again, I don't think the justification for going into Iraq was purely response to 9/11. Like, you guys caused it, we need to go in. I think, if I remember correctly, and people are saying I'm revisionist, but I was also an advocate at the time, the argument was, we let a problem fester. It resulted in dead Americans. You got another problem out there. This guy, look what 11 guys did from Afghanistan and Saudi, obviously originally from Saudi Arabia, but trained in Afghanistan. Look what just 11 guys did. If you don't address it and don't confront it, 3,000 dead Americans. You got another guy over there that likes to tick off Americans, and we've already had to fight him once, and he's still there. And we did at the time believe he had weapons of mass destruction. So, again, that I think that it wasn't directly tied to Afghanistan, but it was definitely influenced by what happened in Afghanistan. So, give us a call. We'd love to hear from you. 303-696-1971. Text us on the Dan Caplis Law text line at 720-819-5115. And now we're getting the text messages that 9/11 was an insider job, which I don't think is the case. But
that's, again, there's nothing that holds up that's ever been proven, and that, again, would be somewhat silly. Yeah, I mean, I understand that there are certain things about, well, what about this? Yeah, but the rest of the timeline falls apart. That's kind of the issue, is that the one thing doesn't prove the entire conspiracy theory. That's the problem inside of that. There are too many holes inside of those conspiracy theories for them to hold up. So that's it. You may have a single thing that you hang on to, but for me, it's just like the people on that look at the video of the moon landing and go, that American flag is moving. There's no wind on the moon. How come it's moving? Well, because of the physics that happen when the person puts it in the ground and secures it. That would carry the momentum into the flag and make it move. That's how physics works.
Join the conversation. Billy and I ripe for debate this Tuesday morning. Plus, it's election day, so we've got lots to cover.
I vote we take a break.
I'm not endorsing anybody in particular on the show, but I am wearing a shirt about my.
That may have a suggestion.
Have a suggestion.
Yes.
All right. You're listening to the Jeff and Bill Show.
This is Denver's talk leader, News Talk 710 KNUS.
Well, short of leaving, is there anything that Saddam Hussein can do at this point to avoid military action?
It's hard to see anything other than his departure that would give the international community any confidence that he would, in fact, live up to those requirements and obligations. The difficulty, we've seen it in the past. Inspectors go in after the Gulf War, for example. We stripped him of a lot of that capability. Defectors told us where it was. We were able to get a lot of his chemical and biological nuclear program pulled down. But as soon as they were gone, he was back in business again. And if he stays in power...
Welcome back to the Jeff and Bill Show. The breaking news headline this morning: Dick Cheney, powerful vice president, Washington insider, opponent of Donald Trump, dies at 84. He died last night. His family announcing this morning. Bill, do you think Saddam Hussein regrets not leaving? They found him in a spider hole.
Yeah, no.
He looked like a homeless man at that point. I mean, he could have fled to Russia or China or
but then
like
again, I'm not sure because then he's under the thumb of the Putin, and what is he allowed to do? And he probably should have fled. I still think that if I'm in Saddam Hussein's position, I still would have tried everything I could to let the U.S. know I don't have all of those weapons, but the reason I need to let everybody know that, or they will attack me. You understand Iran? You understand everything else?
Well, not just that, but internally. Do you remember when he first came into power?
Yep.
And there's that famous scene where his like guards come into the auditorium and start pulling people out and shooting them out back.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's the problem. Is he's a strongman dictator, but he had to figure out a way to tell the U.S. that he wasn't that strong. But you can't necessarily acquiesce and say, okay, we're going to have all these inspections, but maybe that's it. Maybe that would have been, in retrospect, the way for him to stay in power, is to let all the U.S. inspectors come in, and then, of course, they wouldn't find anything, and then everyone would think that he's just some sort of super genius that's hiding it everywhere. So maybe that was it, but I'm not sure it would have worked.
He had burned the bridges with the U.S. Didn't he have an assassination plot against
of course.
W. Bush?
Yeah, and that was part of why the son wanted to go after him.
Right.
Is because he tried to kill my dad. It was assassination plot. I'm not. Once we started the drumbeat to go into Iraq, I'm not certain that there was anything that was going to slow that down. Unfortunately.
Who was McCain's pick for vice president? Was it Lieberman? No,
yeah, no.
That was.
No, McCain had what's her name?
I can see
Sarah
Russia. Palin.
Yeah, I can see Russia from my house.
We walk by her.
Yes.
Her picture every day in the studio.
Yeah, exactly.
So you go from George H.W. Bush and Cheney to McCain and Palin.
Wow. Again,
that was
McCain,
08, right? That was 08.
Yeah, and McCain was trying again to counteract the I haven't that idea, and that he's only involved in Congress, and then he's a Washington insider.
A female governor.
Yep, exactly.
And I remember there's a lot of energy and excitement around Palin, and Palin becomes the launch of kind of the Tea Party in 10, which then brings you to Trump in 16. Romney's this kind of like harken back briefly to the old days of Bush, and then we move on into something else totally different. But do you think about Joe Biden, J.D. Vance, the actual vice presidents following, and then Kamala Harris? Do you think they look back at Cheney and go, I wish I could have the influence he did?
I think some of them do.
What's that?
I think some do.
Yeah.
But here's the thing is, I don't think that Kamala Harris would want to have that kind of influence. Again, if she knew that Biden was going to step aside, then absolutely she would have, because it would have set the stage for her to run. But I think that she was perfectly happy just being the ribbon cutter. And I sort of feel that J.D. Vance is... God. Okay. There's a Looney Tunes cartoon where you've got two mobsters, one that's big, one that's got a small guy, and the other is a big guy. And the small guy's always like, this is what we're gonna do, and you better do this, and and he comes in at one point. Bugs Bunny is hiding stuff from him. And he's like, yeah, you wouldn't do this. And the big guy next to him is like, yeah, boss, that's what he's doing. You're going to tell him. Yeah, get him, boss. That's how I view J.D. Vance. I view J.D. Vance as sitting next to him going, yeah, you tell him. Go get him, boss. That's how I view Vance. That's what I think his role is, because Mike Pence wasn't that. And so I think he looked for that purposefully. Yeah.
Interesting. I see it different. We'll talk more about that. We've got You Choose the News coming up. You're listening to The Jeff and Bill Show.
This is Denver's Talk Leader News Talk 710 KNUS.
All right, welcome back to the Jeff and Bill Show. Billy, it's a Tuesday morning. The people really need it. You choose the news.
Yes, it's that time of the morning where we get a little bit silly because we have been left unsupervised. Yes, it's You Choose the News, America's favorite fake radio news game show. You know how this works? I have browsed the interwebs for mere moments this morning to find really dumb stories about us humans. And you should see the ones I have to skip. I'm just saying. Okay, now I give them even more ridiculous headlines so that we can play this fake radio news game show. Why at 6:51 in the morning would we waste valuable KNUS airtime? It's because those in charge do not arise until 7. So when left unsupervised, Jeff and I will take full advantage. You just see sometimes what happens at the remotes when we notice nobody's paying attention. Alrighty, now, here we go. As always, Blake Olson joins us from the news department. Gentlemen, here are this morning's choices. Headline number 1, turning a profit. Headline number 2, are you ready for the hot mama? Headline number 3, all apologies. And headline number 4, arrested development. Mr. Hunt, your choice.
Let's turn a profit.
Yeah, let's turn a profit. Now, weddings can be extremely expensive. Venue, clothes, food, most importantly, that open bar. That makes all the difference. But paying for everything, not an easy task, especially in today's economy. So, French groom Dagobert Renouf had a different idea about how to cover everything in the wedding. Back in July, the salesman hatched a scheme that he'd get people to sponsor his wedding and pass it on as a business expense under advertising rules in France. The plot's a little bit crazy, but I like crazy good. Just in a few weeks, he had sold most of the ad spots on his suit and was ready to send it to the tailor. Yes, selling spots. And in October 24th, his wedding went off without a hitch, fully paid for, walking down the aisle dressed in a suit containing ads from over 20 companies. 26 startups helped them pay for the wedding. On X, he said it was a beautiful day. When asked about the return on investment, he says, I turned a profit on this one. He sold $10,000.
So smart.
Yep. Then $2,500 in taxes, $5,000 set for suit and arrangements. Paid for the suit. He made $2,000 on the other end. So again, this dude sold advertising on his tuxedo and made $2,000 at his wedding. That's better than any of those dollar dances, and I know what that happens. Okay, so I'm just saying. Yeah, so smart man. I love that idea. Okay.
That's a great idea.
Now, Blake, your choice, sir. Are you ready for the hot mama, all apologies, or arrested development?
Let's go with Arrested Development.
Yeah, Arrested Development. Here we find ourselves in Toronto. Police are saying they are reviewing with concern what recently happened when officers tasered a suspect and then lost control of their cruiser. See, the video shows an officer pointing a taser at a suspect in a parking lot near a Tim Hortons, fires it, suspect falls to the ground. That's when things get weird. The police cruiser, evidently not placed into park, begins to slowly roll towards the suspect on the ground. The officers, leaping into action, try to push the front of the car. That's not really how physics works that well. Once the object is moving, it creates some momentum.
And once it's that engine's moving forward.
Yeah. So, the vehicle bumps and rolls onto the tasered suspect there on the ground as the officers are trying to get it. One actually gets into the driver's seat, and then they back up over him. Yes.
Oh, no.
My favorite part is when the police are yelling at him, "Get down, stop resisting, stop resisting." You're running him over. I don't think he's resisting. I think he's in pain. But oh well. Okay. Now, Toronto police officers said in a statement there were no serious injuries, at least to the car. That's what I made add the last part. They said the suspect allegedly had a knife and was damaging vehicles, and there's an investigation. So yes, that happened. Man. I love the fact that it just slowly rolled over him. A fish called Wanda fans will understand. I'm coming to kill you again. Yes. Okay. Now, final choice, Mr. Hunt. Are you ready for the hot mama or all apologies?
All apologies.
All apologies. University of Illinois is where we find ourselves for this one. A data science discovery is an introductory course taught by statistics professors. One of them has a super cool name, Wade Fagan Schneider. Yeah, that's a professor you don't mess with. His website logo says, "Keep nerding out." Audience and participation counts for a small portion of the course grade, but the professors recently found out that their students were hacking the system. Students attending class each day are shown a QR code, after which, being scanned, it takes them to a multiple choice question. It appears to vary by person, and they have 90 seconds to answer it. Well, a few weeks into the fall semester, the professors, who again do statistics, noticed something weird. Far more students were answering the question and checking in on the QR code than were actually present inside the lecture hall. So they did a little research. They found out that, the students would scan the QR code and then pass it along to other students who then would scan in and check in from home. They called out the students, and all of a sudden they got a bunch of apologies from the students. But they were all incredibly similar. They were written by AI. So the professor has called out the students to go, hey, you guys tried to apologize to us and all of you sent back the same I'm sorry letter from AI. Do better or you're all going to fail. That's the end of your Choosing News. Back to you, Jeff.
Not attending class and using AI. Way to go. Ferris Bueller. You're listening to Jeff and Bill.
KNUS.